but I really feel the cold and my hands are freezing. So if you hear me shiver, it's because I'm pretty cold. Anyway, you have the day off school. I hope you're staying warm. If you've decided to sleep in, then I think that's a wise move. But in this video, we're going to go through the answers of your quadratic skills test from 5A to 5E. Now, I'm not going to do every single question because that would make it a very, very long video, although I do have the answers there for you. So if you want to correct it as you go, you can, but I've also sent you a copy of the marking key. I will be going through some questions though, and I picked these questions because they were questions that people got wrong, and I think it's important to do them. Okay, so the questions I'm going to do, if you're interested, question 10, 19, 20, 22, 23, 24, and 25. And as I was reading that, it sounded like I was calling out bingo numbers or something, lotto numbers. All right, so let's get started. So you can see on the left-hand side, I've got the test. The answers are in the spot. So there's questions 1 to 5. You can pause at any time. So if I go too quickly for you, you just pause me. Okay, and then 6, 7, and 8. And there's question 9. Oh, excuse me. All right, let's do question 10. All right, so question 10. I haven't got myself ready. I haven't got my tablet on this. It's funny, you can't see what I'm doing, yet I describe every single thing I do as though you're interested. Okay, let's have a look at question 10. All right, so this question here says it is a perfect square. So a perfect square means you're going to have something like x plus a number, and I might just call that number, I don't know, y, all squared. Okay, so that's what it means by a perfect square. So basically, when we're looking at x squared plus 6x plus something, you got to think, well, effectively, this is going to be x and x. Looking at the coefficient of x, it's positive. So that means they're probably both positive. If it was negative, it would mean they're both negative. And when we're factorizing a quadratic, just a monic quadratic, you're finding two numbers that add to give you 6 and multiply to give you whatever this number is. And remember, the two numbers have, for it to be a perfect square, have to be the same. So it's going to be x plus 3, x plus 3. So when you so that becomes your perfect square, which is x plus 9. Oops, what am I doing? X plus 3 squared. So your answer here is 9, because when you expand that, you got x squared plus 6x plus 9. All right, the next question I'm going to do is 19. So you can see there the answers for 12, 13, 14, 15, then we've got 16, 17, and 18. And there's 19 down the bottom, so I might just scroll it up a bit. Okay, so complete the factorization. So I'm going to write it here just so I don't have to keep looking over to that side of the screen, not that that's hard. Okay, so this one here, we can just factorize. Now, you can't think of two numbers when multiplied give you 10 and when added give you 8. So that's when we would complete the square. So let me just, first of all, complete the square. So we've got x squared plus 8x. We take the coefficient of x, which is 8. We divide it by 2, and then we square it. So whatever, excuse me, whatever I have here, remember I've got to take it away. And then I've got minus 10 on the end. Now, when I'm factorizing the first 3 terms, it's just going to be a perfect square, and whatever number is in this bracket is going to be that number there. So x plus 4 squared gives you that those 3 terms there. And when you think about it, this number here, the 8 over 2 is 4. 4 squared is 16. So if you factorize that, you would get x plus 4 squared. But we've done enough completing the square that I'm going to skip that step. All right, so then we've got minus, and I said before this was 16, so let's double check. 8 over 2 is 4. 4 squared is 16. And then we've got minus 10. I'm just going to write that again. Okay, so 16 minus 10 gives you negative 26. And then you can kind of see in your answer where the 26 has come from. So we've got the difference of perfect squares now. So your A with your perfect square is going to be x plus 4, and your B is going to be the square root of 26. Now we've done a lot of difference of perfect squares, so I'm not going to go through that whole process again, but if you have a bit of trouble, perhaps go and watch the video on it. Okay, so there we go. So you've got 26 and 26. A lot of people who got this one wrong wrote 10 here, but you can always check your answer by expanding. But that question there, yeah, you have to do by completing the square. All right, the next question we're going to do is 20, which is also on the screen. So let me just scroll up. Okay, so complete this equation. We've got x squared. Let me write it down. X squared plus 30x plus 7. Now I can see the answer is the form of completing the square. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. So we've got x squared plus 30x. Okay, so then I add the coefficient of x, which is 30, divided by 2, all squared. Then we subtract it. And then we've got plus 7. All right, so x plus whatever this number is inside the bracket. Don't worry about the squared. So that's 15. And then we've got minus 30 over 2 is 15, and then 15 squared is 225, if my squares are correct. Okay, and you can kind of see then that the answer is 15. Okay, putting in this first spot, and then we've got minus 218 there. Okay, that's completing the square. If you wanted to continue the factorization, you could obviously do difference of perfect squares, but the question doesn't require us to do that. All right, there's question 21 before we move on to question 22. Okay, I'm just thinking, so I feel like I'm kind of put on the spot when I do these questions, and it doesn't help that I have the sun right in my eyes. Okay, so I'm just writing that correctly. Now, division, this is how we, prior, I guess, to maybe high school, we write our division. If you ever see a division, it's always easier to do it as a fraction. Okay, it makes things easier to see where we cancel out, etc., etc. I think so anyway, but you're welcome to write it in the linear way, but I prefer to write it as a fraction, especially when you're cancelling out terms. Okay, now at this point, I know, okay, the question has been designed that this y plus 8, if we look at our answer, obviously has to be cancelled out somewhere. Okay, so in this y squared minus 64, when I factorize it, one of my factors is going to be y plus 8. And it's not because I can do it straight away in my head. I just know that questions are designed to do that. So let's just focus on the y squared minus 64 first. Now, what we've got here effectively is the difference of perfect squares. We've got y squared and we've got a 64. And remember, the word difference means there has to be a minus sign here. If there was no minus sign here, if it was a plus, then you couldn't factorize it. All right, so just as we did before, we identify the a. So the a is the square root of your first term. So in this case, it's just y. And your b is the square root of the second term, which gives you 8. So let me just change back to black. So on our numerator, doing the difference of perfect squares, we're going to have y plus 8 and y minus 8. And then you can see that we've got the y plus 8 to cancel, and we're just left with y minus 8, which is there. All right, the next question I'm doing, I think I'm doing all of them now from until the end. That's all right. So let's maybe just scroll up. Whoops. Okay, so every question is now on the screen. So let's do question 23. I'm in a bit of a rush because I've actually tried to do this before I'm going into a meeting. All right, question 23 is pretty much the same thing. So we've got, not exactly the same, but we're working it out the same way. So on the top, we've got difference of perfect squares, and then we've got y plus 2 on the bottom. Okay, so just because I used green before, I'm going to use green again. So with our numerator, your a is going to be y, and b is the square root of 16, which is 4. So I'm just taking the square root of each term. So the square root of y squared gives me my a value, and the square root of 16 gives me my b value. Okay, so on my numerator, let's just get that back up. I'm going to have y plus 4, y minus 4 over y plus... Oh, I just realized I made a mistake. Sorry, I don't have time to edit the video. Let's just go back. And I didn't copy it down correctly. I knew I'd made a mistake when my answer didn't come out. It's a y to the power of 4. It's so tiny. Okay, and I think I've actually done this question before. All right, so the square root of y to the power of 4 is y squared. Now let's write that again. So we've got y to the power of 2, plus 4. Y to the power of 2 minus 4. And then we have that all over y plus 2. All right, I just had to pause it to think about it because obviously I still need to cancel this out. But this part here, y squared plus 4, I was planning on doing that in pink, is also a perfect square, a difference of perfect squares. So let's do that one now. So a is y, and b is the square root of 4, which is 2. Oh, I'm quite liking this question. It's quite challenging. Okay, so let's write it again. So y squared plus 4, and then this bracket here, we can factorize a little bit further. So remember the difference of perfect squares. So we've got y plus 2, y minus 2, and then on our denominator we've got y plus 2, and then we can do the cancelling. So I had stopped here but didn't realize that that y squared minus 4 can be factorized as well. So perhaps in the future, when questions don't make it obvious like this one, do think, have I factorized everything? This is quite a challenging but good question to do. We can't factorize this one any further. Remember, you can only use difference of perfect squares when you've got a minus sign separating them. So there we have the answer. Okay, so I've got a couple of minutes to do 2 questions. Don't think I'm going to do that. Okay, 24, y squared plus by plus 32. Oh, so ladies, I did just have to go to a meeting, so you probably didn't even realize, but I was in a 2-hour-long meeting and I've just returned. So I apologize if it seems like there was a bit of a break in the video. All right, so we're moving on to question 24. Let me just, oops, first of all, turn my phone off. Okay, so question 24, we've got y squared plus by plus 32, and the question is asking what's the largest value of b that will allow this expression to be factorized. Okay, so when we think about it, we've got here, if we're factorizing it, we're going to have 2 brackets and we're going to have a y here and a y, okay, because that's the variable. And we're going to have 2 numbers here when multiplied give us 32. and when added give us B. Now, B is not what we're trying to figure out. So we want the maximum value of B in order for it to be factorized. Now, they're going to be positive numbers, okay, simply because we've got a plus here, although B could be negative, but we're looking for the greatest value of B, so it would probably be positive. All right, so let's look at factor pairs of the number 32. So we've got 32 and 1. We can have 16 and 2. We can have 8 and 4. And I don't think just by off the top of my head there are any others. Now remember, the coefficient of y is the addition of these two terms. So adding this factor pair together, we get 33. Adding this factor pair together, we would get 18. And adding this factor pair gives us 12. Now we could use any of these, but remember it's asking for the maximum value of B. So that's going to be 33. So that means your quadratic is going to look like that, making B, the coefficient of y, is 33. All right, last question, question 25. Oh, don't know why I do that. Sometimes I say something and I write something totally different. Okay, what values of A and B would be used to rewrite these factors? So I'm just trying to look at the question. So we've got X. Oh, okay. I like this question. I remember actually putting it in. Gosh, my writing is getting terrible. I sometimes don't write or hold the stylus properly. Like I don't use it like a pen. I hold it, at the top, kind of maybe like a chopstick. Okay, now this question here is basically asking us to simplify the square root of 45. And the good thing is you've just done surds. So this requires you to have a little bit of knowledge of surds. So we think of the highest square number that goes into 45, which is 9. So then we rewrite that as 9 times 5. And then that separates to be the square root of 9 times the square root of 5. The square root of 9 is 3. That's why we chose it. We're choosing a number that we can take the square root of. So your value of A is 3 and B is 5. All right, girls. Whew, I'm now sitting here in the sunshine, but I'm still cold. I hope you have a great day. Bye.